Hi, everybody. Welcome to this month's episode of Elevant Insights. We are super excited to be talking charitable giving with you today. What an awesome time of year. I think our hearts are a little bit more towards those ideas this time of year. And just, I know for me, I have a lot more gratitude in my heart, just thinking back on the year, considering the blessings that I have and naturally it's kind of my mind goes towards those charitable ideas. And so we're going to talk a little bit more about that today. And Dan's going to introduce our guest here just a minute. But before we jump in the name of gratitude, we got to give a huge, I guess, thank you to everybody that's listening, everybody that has supported Elevant Wealth throughout the year and trusted Elevant Wealth with your financial planning, your wealth management, your legacy planning. Whatever you're doing with us, we just appreciate you. And it's fun to be in our team meetings because there's such a feeling of stewardship over doing the right thing for you amongst our team, and that culture is really fun to be a part of. So thank you so much. In the spirit of the fourth quarter and Christmas and Thanksgiving, we had to start this one out that way. And so, Dan, if you will kick off this month's Elevon Insights by introducing our guest.
You bet. So I'm grateful to introduce Clark Hivenen. Clark has been part of the Twin Falls Estate Planning Council. So I've known him for a couple of years, get to meet with him generally once a month, and appreciated his leadership and commitment to charitable giving in the Twin Falls community. His role there, he's a philanthropic advisor for the Idaho Community Foundation. He's had a lot of years of experience. Clark has experienced helping or empowering Idahoans to make a lasting impact by creating charitable giving funds tailored toward basically your favorite cause. With a lot of expertise and passion for community, Clark's helped donors turn their generosity into meaningful change throughout Idaho. Before he was at Idaho Community Foundation, Clark served as the director of estate and trust and gift planning for the University of Idaho. Did that for about 10 years. So without any further ado, I'll go ahead and introduce Clark to our call. Thanks, Clark.
All right, yeah, you bet. And thanks, guys, for having me on board for your episode this time. Brian, the phrase you or the term you use, stewardship, is a key phrase. And where I come from, we're placed here to steward what we get, and part of that is the charitable giving. And so that's kind of what we'll talk about a little bit. I'll share my screen here, and we'll just walk through a little PowerPoint we have to hopefully help some people out. As soon as I get that up there. And there we go. All right, can you all see that okay? All right, very good. Well, as Brian and Dan both said, that this is a charitable giving part of your planning. That's what this is, the emphasis is on today. Part of that being, of course, the stewardship of what we are given to and trusted with. This agenda looks extensive. We're going to run through it pretty quick. A couple of comments only on the One Big Beautiful Act bill and how it pertains to charitable giving in particular. We'll talk about philanthropy as part of your planning. Actions to take as far as your maximum to maximize your giving. Year end is where we're at, but essentially this can happen any part of the year. But since we are at year end, it's a little more emphasis, as Brian said, on the charitable side of things. It's the time of year where we tend to focus on things a little bit more for that purpose. We'll look at and touch on charitable vehicles for smart giving, look at the how and the next steps you can take. I will talk about the Idaho Community Foundation for a bit, just to give our perspective on things. Excuse me, and then the next steps to charitable giving, and then a quick comment or two on the transfer of wealth, which is intriguing with the numbers we've seen. So moving on, let's see. Dan, you already gave me a quick, excellent background, probably better than I could have done. So we won't belabor this any. You all know that I know enough to be dangerous, I guess. So we'll move right on. As far as the One Big Beautiful Act overview, the key elements are that it eliminates the sunsetting of the exemption. In 2026, that exemption will be $15 million and $30 million for married couples. I'm not in that strata, but for those of you that are, I stress getting professional help, however you can. Investment planning is all critical. For most, the most relevant issue in estate planning is the income tax planning part of things. That's where we all tend to center on. For taxpayers, it's age 70 and a half or older, the QCD or qualified charitable distribution and or required minimum distribution if you're age 73 plus. maybe the best asset for giving rather. And if you're taking the standard deduction, which again is not for everybody, but if it is, that falls into the category you want to explore. Philanthropy itself is for everyone. It's the misconception that it's just for these exorbitant wealthy people is a falsehood. It comes right down to where, like Brian said, where is your heart? What are the causes that are important to you? And if you have the heart and the capacity of any kind to help other people with this, that's what we're here for, in my opinion. And it is part of the overall planning process. It is not a standalone activity or practice. It's something that should be intermingled with your investment planning, your tax planning, and so forth. Charitable goals and tax-effective planning should be part of everyone's life, including the family. You need to involve your family if you haven't already. It's a good idea to not spring any surprises on people, and it gets others involved with what the objective of your philanthropy is. And again, I stress that you want to work with your financial advisors like these guys here, or the tax advisors that you have, preferably both if you have a tax accountant. Tax attorneys come into play depending on where you're at on your trust work and whatnot. Get them involved. Don't be out on an island because it can cost you. Steps to your year-end charitable giving planning. Like I said, include your family. Involve your kids. I don't care how old they are. Involve them and grandkids if you have them. I tend to fall into that category. I've got a couple of daughters and two grandkids, and so far, and that's something that I've got to do as well. And I've already talked with them about some things, but it's something that you want to breach the subject early on and start the discussion on identifying causes to advocate for and to support going forward. You want to include your investment and tax advisor in this process. Let them know who your kids are and grandkids. Perhaps have them come to a meeting with your advisors. Get them involved. You want to coordinate this charitable giving with your overall tax and investment strategies. The overall plan has to include this segment. You want to formalize your charitable giving with long-term philanthropic goals. That's part of your identifying the causes. The goals can be short-term, medium, or long-term, and we'll talk about how that kind of comes into play here in just a minute. And then you can create charitable giving funds. These can be what the popular term and the one you hear the most of is as DAFs, or donor advised funds. There are other funds which we'll touch on real quickly here in just a bit. But you can create your own giving fund to accomplish the purpose or purposes that you have in mind. There are basically the idea is that are you willing to help some people? The answer is yes. Can it be done? The answer is yes. It is, as this question points out here, the charitable vehicles, it's how can you help these people? How can you help the causes? And what would the next steps be to make that happen? So as I mentioned, I'm going to touch on the Idaho Community Foundation perspective of what we are, what we do, and this kind of runs into what this charitable giving is and how it can help you help others. The Idaho Community Foundation was founded in 1988. It's one of the best kept secrets in the state. We are the only statewide community foundation. We have over 700, I think it's 742 now, active charitable funds throughout the state. Our investment subcommittee manages over 300 million in an endowed funds, and we support and grant out for causes in all 44 counties of the state every year. That's a given. And our president last year traveled to every single county to get a feel for what is going on out there. We have regional council members who are in every region in our state, so we have people on board on site who know what each community and each region needs. And those are the ones that decide where grants are given if they're not already designated. We are here to elevate nonprofit impact, as Dan was saying. That's part of what we do. We are the conduit through which people can help and impact other nonprofits throughout the state. And in doing so, we connect Idahoans. We live in a pretty nice state, and the people here have tremendous hearts. This is something where if we can connect all of us together to help causes, it's an incredible thing to watch and be a part of. It's like I told my wife, I said, that this is a kind of job where if I do my job right, I help other people, and we all win. And and so does the state. So it's a wonderful thing. Now, how do we do this? We create a community for personalized, whoops, let me get back there for a minute. Charitable fund and plans for people who want to take care of Idaho and the issues and organizations that are important to them. Really, everybody has different perspectives, but it's something that you want to identify and make sure you're helping people. This past year, we granted out over $14 million to Idaho nonprofits. That was in 2024. We're on our way to exceed that. I think we're going to far exceed that. And then since inception, we've granted out over $200 million since we were established in '88. So we've been able to help a lot of people. We want to continue doing so, and that takes all of us working together. Now, then, what is the difference between Idaho Community Foundation and, say, a private foundation? Private foundations are created by those on the top tier of high wealth, typically. The Bill Gateses and people like that who are going to create their own private foundations. Anybody ever heard of Elon Musk? He's got one too. They have typically one single revenue stream that funds their foundation, typically family money or family assets of some kind. The decision-making body is very narrow. It's typically family members if it is a family foundation, or identified corporate members if it's a private foundation that's corporate oriented. They do have philanthropic focus, typically for reasons that are support, in many cases, support their efforts as corporations or financial people, but it isn't just singular purpose just for that. It can be wide ranging, but typically they're very narrow. As far as the community foundations, we're different in that we have multiple streams of revenue from donors, private foundations, which will work with us, nonprofits and businesses. All will create charitable funds for various purposes. Those multiple circles you see there are all the various funds we have and all the various causes that people are supporting. And the philanthropic focus goes out to multiple directions. That's like a multiple lane highway, whereas the private foundation is the single mountain road. So that's one of the main differences. Community foundations work across the board, helping everyone. Private foundations have a narrow focus. Now, the type of funds that we work with, I had mentioned the donor advised funds. Those are exactly how they're named. The donor advises every year where the grants are to go to, what causes. That can change every year. They're very involved in identifying who they are. They instruct us where to send the grants. That's how the advised part of the donor advised fund. A designated fund is if a donor does not want to have to be involved every year or have to come up with the same different idea on who to grant the funds to. They'll designate it right up front in the fund agreement paperwork. And every year, like clockwork, the grant will go out specifically to nonprofits or whoever as designated. And it could be more than one, but that's the meaning of the designated funds. Skip over Forever Idaho Fund real quick. We'll move to agency funds, also known as organizational funds. These are nonprofits, businesses that have charitable purposes, even if it's an operational fund for special projects or whatnot for a nonprofit, they'll create a fund for us to manage. And they get to do the fun part, which I'll touch on here in just a minute. And so you create an agency fund with advisors that are identified. Scholarship funds are exactly what they say. That's where a donor or nonprofits or whoever, schools, organizations, for example, will put together a fund to help students or graduates of their schools to go on to higher education. Now, steering back to the Forever Idaho Fund, that's where donors of any kind will come to us and they say, we want to create a charitable fund. I have no idea where to put it. Take care of it yourselves and let me know how it's doing. That'll all be put in a Forever Idaho Fund. Those regional council people I mentioned in every region, there are 4 regions with Idaho Community Foundation, they will keep an eye on what the nonprofits are and the needs are in the communities within their region. Applications for those grants will come in every year. That regional council will get together and identify who and how much can receive those grants. That's where the Forever Idaho Fund comes in. That's primarily where the grants from that Forever or the endowment come from, the 300 million in endowed funds. Will spin off grant money that's then divvied up to these identified charities. Now, in every single fund, there's 2 directions on them. One's endowed, one's not endowed. In most simple terms, an endowed fund is forever. It goes on into perpetuity. The principal or corpus is never invaded. It spins off earnings based on our investment performance, which has been for a very conservative fund, roughly 7.9% a year over the last 10 years. They do pretty well. We've got some pretty smart investment people managing things like these 2 here that Brian and Dan could probably do as well or better. So hats off to them too. Our current annual distribution rate is 4.25%. That rarely changes. That's what it's been for the last 3 years since I came on board. But what that means is just using a round number of $100,000 in a charitable fund, that'll spin off $4,250 a year to a designated or identified nonprofit, a charitable purpose. Nice chunk of change for some charities. The nice part is that, and that percentage is set by our board of directors each year, and that hasn't changed. Nice part is down there you'll see in quotes the exemplary funds. This is like the Super Bowl of charitable funds, where the value of the fund now exceeds what was originally contributed in an endowed fund. That's because if our investment subcommittee is earning, say, 7.9%, spinning off 4.25, the principal is growing as well. So at some point, that principal is going to keep spinning off more and more and more, to where the amount that's distributed is more than the original fund. So that's the sweet spot, so to speak. The pro is that it should perpetuate the donor's values and priorities well into the future, long after the donor is gone, or what all of us are gone for that matter. Cons are it's inflexible when the gift is made. That's it. It's a made gift. It's done. Its impact can be different each year if it's an advised fund. If it's designated, then it's more predictable. The non-endowed side, it can be fully expended. Like I tell, well, that never happens. I told an agency fund, an organization that's putting one together, you can put this in and next week pull the whole thing back out, distribute it to whatever your project is. That's not typically the intent of most when they open a fund, but it allows them to get access to it if they need to. The funds can be contributed immediately, or they can be allowed to build. It's a lot more flexibility for that. It's very agile, as it says in the pros. Cons are it's that the money is donated. The money that is donated has a finite existence. It doesn't exist into perpetuity. Right now, just to give you an idea of what the balance is, we manage about 548 endowed funds. Non-endowed is about 175, but it is growing. We're getting more non-endowed funds as we go forward. Our primary assets that can be contributed cash, obviously, publicly traded securities, especially if you're trying to have a capital gains issue, you can contribute the stock to as the gift. Us or whoever you contribute to can sell it, and then you get the write-off and avoid the capital gains as well. And then the proceeds are placed as you wish for your charitable purposes. And again, QCDs and the RMDs may be one of the main draws for a lot of people, especially if you don't need the income on that required minimum distribution. And then obviously estate planning, wills and trusts and whatnot, bequests that come to us. Some of the ones that require little additional steps are real estate. I've handled a couple of those. I've got a real estate license. They're only complicated in that you have to do certain testing of the property if there are some issues. If it's near a gas station, for example, you have to do an environmental assessment, things like that. Something else that's becoming more popular is private foundation assets being transferred to us. This is where the second or third generation of family, for example, just doesn't want the hassle anymore. So they'll transfer it to ICF. And then life insurance and IRAs for that matter. Beneficiary designations, it's pretty simple. You can designate a percent or a dollar amount out of the proceeds of a life insurance policy or an IRA account or something like that. One thing to mention, legacy charity giving is something that's more on the line of adding a charity, or in our case, you make ICF the beneficiary of your estate for a percentage or a dollar amount. An agreement is signed right now, but you don't have to write a check for anything. It's funded after you pass. But after you pass, the monies are managed according to the agreement you put in place right now. So you can effectively govern the giving long after you're gone, which is a nice feature. And it's becoming very popular these days. We'll talk about why here in just a little bit with that transfer of wealth. What else we got? Oh, here's the part I wanted to mention where the services that we provide listed right here. We do all the accounting, the tax processing, the 990s that have to be reported. We invest and manage the funds. We do all the due diligence and grant processing. The fun part of allocating where the funds go to in grants and charitable giving is what the donor gets to do. So we take on the burden where they get to do the fun part, which is most people will smile as soon as they find out how that balance of work goes. Now, common scenarios, obviously, if you have no heirs, no children, or if you're selling a business, or if you supported causes for years, and you just want to formalize that a little bit. If you're establishing an estate plan right now, or you're revising one, if you have appreciated assets that are capital gains exposed, interested in tax efficient giving, and then care deeply. The bottom line about this, care deeply about the Idaho community and what the nonprofits are that operate within the community. Clients are asking, you guys, Dan and Brian are probably hearing this too, as clients are starting to ask some pretty hard questions now. It's becoming front and center in most people's minds. How can I leave a legacy? Why was I here? That question. And how can I best support my community? How do I include giving in my estate planning? And how can I teach philanthropy to my children and the grandkids? Those are big questions. Philanthropy is a powerful tool to help in all of those with the tax planning, the capital gains mitigation, retirement planning, estate and legacy design, which comes into play with legacy gifts. And then that sense of purpose. Why was I here in the first place? This is what I believed in. This is what I stood for. And that's part of our stewardship. We believe in certain things, all of us do, good or bad, and hopefully mostly good. And that's what we want to support and help others. And that's one of the reasons we're here. We're, in my beliefs, we're given certain things as stewards. We don't own anything. Our responsibility is to take care of what we have responsibility for and help others with what we can. So that's what philanthropic planning is for. That's what we do. Steps to explore a charitable gift plan. It's italicized. Number one is discuss this with your financial and tax advisor. Make sure it meshes with all the other planning you're doing. It's got to be connected. It's most efficient when it's connected, and communication is key. And then after you've managed to do that, if you're moving forward, feel free to visit with the Idaho Community Foundation advisor. I'm more than happy. I sit down and visit with people all the time. There's no obligation. We don't bill you for that. In fact, we don't charge you anything unless you actually open a fund with us, and then it's a small 1% fee. And so that's reasonable. Third, identify objectives for your gift. Why are you looking at putting a gift? What's your cause? Consider the nonprofits you wish to support. Our website has a multitude of nonprofits listed that you can scan through by category and see if there are any that look like they're worthy of your support. Then identify how you wish to provide that support, be it right now, down the road in a state gift, or some kind of current charitable gift. You may do a combination of the three. That's where talking to your advisors and us might help narrow that down so you're fully informed before you have to make any decision. Once that's done, if you get to that point, we, Idaho Community Foundation, are happy to put together a draft agreement for you to review with your advisors. If it makes sense, you can approve it, sign off electronically even, and then just fund the plan, whatever you decided to. If it's a state gift, you're signing the gift memorandum of understanding, and then that goes in the file along with your agreement. Somewhere down the line, when you pass, then it's executed at that point. Quick thoughts on transfer of wealth. Dan and Brian, I'm sure you're very familiar with this. The Idaho Community Foundation partnered with the University of Minnesota Extension to conduct a study on the impact of the transfer of wealth from one generation to the next. And the numbers are remarkable. It's shocking, even in Idaho, how much opportunity there is to help philanthropically. There are about 693,000 plus Idaho households. And in those households, and this includes assets of all kinds, land, businesses, and everything else, there's about 793 billion in Idaho now, household net worth right now. Significant number even for Idaho. What this means that there's a transfer timeline. We looked at both 10-year time horizon and then out 40 years, roughly about another generation. And that showed us that about 30.6 billion is going to transfer from one generation to the next within the next 10 years. That's a huge number. If you extend that out to 40 years, that approaches 140 or 150 billion transferring from one generation to the next. It's a huge opportunity to help. If you think about it, just 30.6 billion, if we could capture just 5% of that for philanthropic purposes, we could spin off over the next 20 years close to $2 billion to help philanthropic purposes just in Idaho. And imagine what we could do for those nonprofits with that kind of help. So what we would do, we asked you consider work with your advisors, Dan and Brian, to help us strengthen Idaho communities together. Dream big. We don't get anywhere if we don't dream big. That's why we're here to help others dream big and accomplish what they want to have done. And before I leave you, there's actually something called the Hokey Pokey Fund with the Idaho Community Foundation. It's real. The co-writer of the Hokey Pokey song, a guy by the name of LaPrise, I believe, helped write it in 1949. And his family created a scholarship fund with the Idaho Community Foundation to help, I think it's second year music students at the College of Southern Idaho. It's still in existence, it's going strong. So, as I like to say, our president says this too when he finishes a presentation. He says, just like the song said, what we've talked about here, that's what it's all about. And that's what we're here to try and help you do. If you'd like to reach out, that's my office number and extension, and more importantly, my email. I suggest using the email. That's the quickest way to get a hold of me if I'm traveling for business or talking in these meetings. Feel free also to go out to our website at idahocf.org and check out the website. It's a very good website. And then if you wish to check out the results of that transfer of wealth webpage, that's a code you can scan as well. And so that's what we're here for. And hopefully that's been of some help to you today.
That's great. Would you mind skipping back to slide number 4 for a second? I wanted to kind of talk about how we can take all of this that we've learned about, because the Idaho Community Foundation could serve as a wonderful opportunity for our clients or other people that we work with if they're answering the question, I want to give, but you may not have that passionate group that you want to give to naturally, right? Like,
Right.
some people give to their church, or they believe in and support a specific charity or whatnot.
Mhm.
It sounds like the Idaho Community Foundation is just a great option to accelerate your charitable giving in a way that can facilitate your tax planning and your tax strategy and your legacy goals if you don't have every dollar of your charitable budget earmarked for a specific thing,
Correct.
which I love. And so, but this OBBBA, the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, has really brought a lot more opportunity for charitable giving. And we're talking to a lot of our clients about this right now. And so not just the estate tax limits going up, but Clark had mentioned this 70 and a half years old where you can now do qualified charitable distributions at 70 and a half years old when you hit that age, and it counts as your required distribution at 73. But there's also a couple other things I wanted to mention as well. So one is that one of the changes to the One Big Beautiful Bill Act allows for a $2,000 below the line deduction, or an addition to your standard deduction, essentially, if you're giving to charity over and above your standard deduction. That's a pretty neat thing, because before, let's say you were giving a bunch of money to charity every year and you weren't doing it out of an IRA with those qualified charitable distributions in mind, you likely weren't getting a lot of benefit for your charitable giving unless you were giving $35,000, $40,000 or more to charity to get over that standard deduction. And so now you can recapture some of that, where you can get your full standard deduction plus an additional $2,000 on top of that, added to your standard deduction if you're giving to charity, which is pretty neat. The QCD, that all gets added to your standard deduction as well. So if you are over 70 and a half, there's some great opportunity to magnify your charitable giving from a tax perspective, because you're going to get both the standard deduction and the qualified charitable distribution deduction. So that's great. Couple other things. Highly appreciated stock. I know there was another slide here that Clark emphasized, but in-kind donations where you can gift shares of stock instead of gifting cash, and avoid not just getting the charitable deduction on your taxes, but also avoid the capital gain on that highly appreciated stock. Now, the cool thing is this also works with real estate. It works with cattle. It works with commodities. It works with, several other things, anything that would be treated as a capital gain if you sold it. And so there's some great opportunity there as well. And charitable bunching and giving to donor advised funds. There's just so many different ways to go about your charitable giving strategy. Here to help you with, because we're able to help figure out how to get the best tax benefits for your charitable desires as we possibly can. I love that Clark emphasized the word stewardship and letting your heart guide your charitable budget. But in general, if we can take that charitable budget and do everything we can to magnify the tax benefits of that, then we're creating kind of a win-win in our charitable giving. So Clark, thank you so much for this
Very welcome.
information about the Idaho Community Foundation, and honestly, what a cool job you get to do.
Yeah, I think so.
And just live in that charitable heart, work for a foundation that lives in that charitable mindset year round. So, Dan, anything else you want to follow up with before we wrap up?
No, I would just echo both of your sentiments in relationship to charitable giving. One, that it is for anybody. You don't have to have millions of dollars on the side, that anything you do can be beneficial to your community, making Idaho a great place to live, and for the future to help solidify that. And then also that there's a lot of options, and teaching family members about being charitably minded can start right now. And so, again, I appreciate Clark's insight. It was very helpful. Thank you.
I appreciate it. I was glad to help.
Often I'll tell people, and if you've known me for long, you've heard me say this before, but there's only two things you're ever going to do with your money. You're either going to spend it or you're going to give it away.
That's right.
And so you might as well do that intentionally. And so Merry Christmas to all of you. I hope you have a wonderful holiday season. And we would invite you to consider how you can give back in your own spheres and in your own circles. And we're certainly grateful to be a part of that conversation here at Elevant Wealth. So next month, quick announcement, we're going to have another distinguished guest. We're super excited to have another person that is frequented on CNBC and ABC and Fox News and CNN and all the different news outlets. His name is Mike Aroni, and he has been on our webinar before, and we're always super excited to have him on, where we're going to dive into the investment outlook for 2026. And so he represents State Street Global Advisors, one of the larger money managers in the world, and we're excited to have him on our webinar to talk about 2026 and what we should expect, and also dissecting a little bit of what we saw in 2025. So a little more of a tactical conversation next month, but it'll be, I believe, January 15th. Does that sound right, Dan?
Correct.
All right, so January 15th at noon. We'll look forward to seeing you then. So enjoy the end of your year, and we will see you next month.
Merry Christmas. Happy holidays.
Merry Christmas, everybody.
Here to help you with, because we're able to, I think what I find a lot is if we don't have a clear plan, we're often enticed by fads of the time or exciting investments.
Exactly.
And may be adding a little more risk to our portfolios than we really want. And even just are more prone to panic during volatile times, if we don't have a clear plan that we can stick to. And you kind of spoke to it, but really folding in your specific liquidity needs, right? Like if you need your money coming up soon because you're going on a trip, or you're going to buy a car, or maybe buy that second home down south, right? Or even just that you're getting ready to retire and you're going to retire at a certain point. Just really positioning those investments intentionally and having a really clear and concise plan for not just how you're going to weather volatility and manage the taxation of those investments, but also just when you need those investments throughout your retirement years. Because certainly if we know we're not going to need a certain bucket of money, maybe for 20 plus years, well, then we can invest that a little differently than maybe money that we anticipate needing in the next year or two, right? So, and that will help us to maintain perspective with that 20-year money when the markets get volatile. We know we don't need it for 20 years. We can stick to that long-term plan and manage that storm, if you will, or weather that storm. So,
Very true.
generally speaking, just having a clear investment plan, very specific to your retirement lifestyle and the goals and the liquidity needs that you have coming up. So that's number one. Any final thoughts on number one, Dan?
No, I think we'll kind of come back to that as we move through the rest of these as well.
Yeah. So let's jump to number two then. So number two is taking too much risk. Now, I think this is a natural feeling, right? When we get closer to retirement, we do have that sense that we should be less risky, right? And we see that in clients a lot. The extreme version of that would be to throw everything under your pillow or bury it in a coffee can in the backyard, right? We've heard all of these things before, but generally speaking, I think our society does a pretty good job of helping coach us towards this idea that the risk that we're going to take at 30 years old may not be the same risk that we're going to take at 60 years old. And so, Dan, maybe talk a little bit more about that mistake and why it's a problem and maybe how we can avoid it.
Well, I think the very first thing that everyone seems to focus in on is volatility. And so if we've got our investments in assets that are going to grow, they're also have a greater chance of downturn. So when we go back to, let's say, COVID, and the market was very volatile, and you were in 100% stocks, for example, you had a lot of volatility when the market went down. And so it comes back to a lot of different things: risk tolerance, making sure that we don't have more than what we need. We spend a lot of time at Elevant Wealth focusing on the importance of having a comprehensive financial plan. And as we go through the investment part of that, a lot of times we can reduce the risk or the return that we're trying to get for a client and still have a better outcome because we're not going through the sawtooth of ups and downs as much. So if we have too much risk, we may have the peaks, but the valleys are deeper. And so we just need to be careful that we don't have too much risk in our portfolio. And some of the ways that we avoid that are to make sure that we have a balanced portfolio, that it's diversified, and that you spend some time in making sure you understand exactly what your risk appetite is. I have some clients that are very, very conservative in their 30s, and I have another client that's in his 80s that's very growth oriented. And so it has to come back to what your risk tolerances are and that you understand. But just in general, again, if you've got short-term needs, midterm needs, or you might need that money in the near future, you may need to pull back a little bit and not have as much risk in your portfolio. Because if we have a downturn in the market and then you need that money, you're going to be at a disadvantage versus if you had a broader diversification and less risk.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think another thing, and this kind of goes back to the clear investment plan that we talked about a minute ago, is, when we're seeking too much risk, oftentimes we're chasing those high returns, right? We're looking for things that are really exciting and have huge potential upside. Maybe we're trying to make up for lost time, in retirement. When you're building your assets, you're saying, "Hey, I've got to really make up for lost time and take more risk than what is comfortable to you or what your plan even needs." And so taking too much risk, I think, is again kind of a natural thing. Most people don't have this problem, but there certainly are those situations where we see people chasing high returns, really leaning into things that are very aggressive and very volatile. It's a different game that we're playing when we're pulling money out of our investments to support retirement than when we're putting money in. That extreme volatility that you're seeing with high risk investments um, is not that big of a deal when you're not selling any shares. When you're only buying shares, you can actually take advantage of that volatility. But when it's volatile and you're pulling money out, the opposite benefit is happening, where it's actually hurting you by selling more shares in down market to get the money that you need. And so essentially, taking too much risk is investment mistake number two that we see. All right, let's jump to number three. So, funny enough, investment mistake number three is quite similar to number two. It is taking too little risk. And so, again, a lot of people take an extreme version of, like I said before, putting it under our pillow, burying it in a coffee can in the back. I've accumulated my money. I don't want to take any more risk with it. I just want to have it and know I'll never lose it. So, Dan, maybe talk about that a little bit. Why would taking too little risk be considered a mistake?
That's a really important question, and I think to to start off with that, I'd want to kind of put our mindset in the scenario that as we go into retirement, um, this may be the new job that, if you look at retirement as a job, you're probably going to be in that new job 20 to 30 years, and we can't have money invested um, ultra conservatively or maybe even just too conservatively and expect it to last in a long period of time. So when we're talking about retirement or long term, we need to have something that is going to have some growth applications to it, and that means that you again need to go through, come up with a diversified type of portfolio that has some bonds in it or treasuries or things that it's going to give some protection, but it's also got to have some growth element because we all know that it costs a lot more for eggs, for milk, postage stamps, whatever it might be, that things are going to cost more in the future. And the only way that we can do that is to have some things that are growing. I've overtold this story, but I think it's a great analogy when we're looking at about how to invest. So I'm going to bring back in 2 and 3 that we need to make sure we're focusing on the objective. So a lot of times I'll tell people when they come in to invest, I'll say, well, what's the money needed for? Or in other words, in my analogy, where do you want to go for lunch? Our office is in the Fred Meyer parking lot. So if we're going to go to lunch and going to walk over to Great Harvest Bread, we can do that in about 5 minutes. If you've got a little longer time horizon, I'm equating those places to eat to time horizons. If you wanted to go to Boise and go to, I'm trying to think of a place in Chandler's, for example, in Boise, you're going to drive. And the final one would be if you wanted to go to Planet Hollywood in New Zealand, you're going to fly. And where we run into problems is when we try to fly from here to Great Harvest Bread, or we try to walk from here to Planet Hollywood. So to cover all this again is that too much risk can be detrimental if we're looking at short term, and we're looking at long term. Being too conservative can have similar types of problems where you're going to have 20 plus years in retirement, and you need to make sure that you have some diversification in there and you've got growth application to have that continue to grow over the long time. And finally on that, some things that you could do to help avoid that. We use the analogy of a bucket strategy, meaning that you have a bucket for short term, you have a bucket for midterm investments, and a bucket for longer term investments. Make sure that you have assets, money invested according to those needs of that money. Or in other words, that your investments are situated as far as where you want to go eat and have lunch today.
Oh, I love that. So I want to share real quick on our screen just a visual of a bucket strategy because we do see this as a great option. There's several options to make sure we're not taking too much risk, but also making sure that we're taking enough. And a bucket strategy is a very common retirement strategy that's used to make sure that we're doing a good job in both sides of the coin. And so certainly the money that we need now we need to keep more liquid, but we also need to take less risk with it because we need it right now. We can't afford for it to go down a lot and pull that money out in a down market. There's just not enough time for it to recover if it goes down. It's just that simple. And then we've got our money that we need not now, but soon, right? So we still want to invest that, maybe with a goal of keeping up with inflation, just maintaining our purchasing power is kind of the goal. But we want to limit the downside risk, right? So that would be money that we need soon. We don't have a lot of time for this to recover. We have a little bit of time, but not a lot of time for it to recover if it takes a big dive. And then we've got our later money we really don't need for quite a long time. And so with that, we can really take more of a growth potential or an accumulation mindset. The reality of it is, as a retiring couple today, if they're retiring at, say, 65, they may have some money that they don't need for 30 years, And if that's the case, we can put on a different hat when we invest that money and consider that 30-year time horizon and the need to keep up with long-term inflation and just the opportunity to really grow those assets over time. So the bucket strategy really helps us with both investment mistake number 2 and 3 in not taking too much risk with that money that we need in the now and in the soon buckets, but really making sure that we're taking on the appropriate level of risk with our later buckets. So, so bucket strategy is great, diversification is great, and then just again having a larger plan in reference to your investment strategy, I think is a great way to help navigate this. All right, so let's jump to number 4. And this one's pretty common, but this one's also a little bit harder to navigate. And so let's jump into it. So number 4 investment mistake is not having a withdrawal strategy, or generally not having a plan for how you're going to withdraw from what accounts and in what order and what comes first and what gets saved for last, what goes to the family and what are we going to use during our lifetime. So generally speaking, not having a withdrawal strategy in your financial plan. So Dan, talk us through that a little bit.
Great question, Brian. And this is something that's weighed on my mind for a lot of years, and in fact was part of the genesis last year why I took some courses on retirement income strategies. And what it really boils down to is there are a lot of different plans, different ways to start pulling that money out. A lot of folks will say, well, you grow your nest egg and then you just take out 4% and everything will be fine. And in general terms, that's on the right track, but there's some guiding principles that we need to make sure that we're looking at as we focus on that. It may come back that, maybe you want a little bit more security, and that if the market's down when you start taking that out, or, the sequence of withdrawal, what happens if you retire right when the market's down and that 4% number is down and now you're taking out more than what you wanted to. So it's very important that you have a strategy that can look at the particular situations that are going on within the marketplace. And, the other thing, simply putting in that in place, that you're going to take out X amount of dollars and that you revisit it, that a year from now, you're going to look at it and say, 4%, I can take out more, or I need to reduce it and take out a little less. So it's important that it's not just a one and done, or even worse is that you just, I think I need $15,000 for the next 6 months. So you take out a lump sum and don't plan. And so obviously there's a little bit of a theme to what we're talking about today, is that you need to have that foundational plan, whether it's building your nest egg, not having too much risk, not having enough risk, or in this case, how to take that out. That's really the key, is that you have a consistent plan that can be reviewed on an annual basis, and making sure that you're going to weather the storm. Because what we feel is very important in our clients' life is that they have enough money to take them to their end of their life, and that they can pass on what they want to the legacy, whether that's family or charities. And so as we go back to withdrawal strategies, making sure that, one, we're taking it from the right areas, whether it's a Roth or an IRA or annuities or cash accounts, that we're taking it out from the right areas and taking it out tax efficiently. That's kind of what I'm thinking about withdrawal strategies right now, Brian.
No, I think that's great. And I think when I think about withdrawal strategy, the first thing that comes to my mind is the tax aspects of that. I think that most retirees can do better from a tax planning perspective than they do, generally speaking. We're going to talk about Roth conversions and required distributions and some of those things in here in a minute. But even just your withdrawal strategy can fold into your tax strategy overall and really bring more money home to you at the end of the day. The funny thing about taxes is there's how many pages in the tax code? Tens of thousands of pages in the tax code. So I had somebody tell me one time, knowledge is money when it comes to the tax environment, right? Because if you can save $1, that's 100% rate of return on that dollar. And that's hard to come by in your investment strategy without taking, generally speaking, any risk, right? And so being intentional with your withdrawal strategy allows you to really consider the tax aspects of your accounts, right? So we know that IRAs, we pull it out, it's going to be taxed. We know that if we pull money out of a Roth, it's not going to be taxed, it's tax free. We know if we pull it out of a non-retirement account, we're going to pay some tax on the growth and we're going to return our principal to ourselves tax free. And so really just using those different resources that you have to put together a strategy that doesn't just work from an investment perspective, but that really optimizes your tax situation as well. And
Yeah.
so, and also folding in some of your other taxable income to all of this. Maybe your PERSI, or if you have a government pension of some kind that's taxable. We know that Social Security is partially taxable, and that has actually got a little better with the big beautiful bill, whatever they're calling that bill that Trump just passed, right? And so that's relatively efficient income from a tax perspective. And so we've got all these options. It's a function of putting it all together, piecing it all together for the greatest optimization of your investment strategy and your tax strategy, and ultimately just coming home with more at the end of the day. So, um, all right, big number 5. I think we need a drum roll, and there might just be an encore at the end of this too. So we'll just see. But number 5, let's actually talk a little bit about required minimum distributions. So really, the mistake here is ignoring required minimum distributions or just not approaching them until the IRS says you have to. Now, currently, for a lot of our retirees coming into retirement right now, they have an age 73 required age of distribution. In other words, you have to take money out of that IRA and pay tax on it. The IRS has let you defer that long enough and they want their tax money. Well, for a lot of us, it's actually changing to age 75. And I'd have to look at the dates. I want to say it's if you were born after 1960, that might
That's
be
right.
right.
Yeah.
And so if that's the case, your required distribution age doesn't even start until age 75. Now that may seem like a ways off for some people, but those of you who are on required distribution age, you're going to tell all of us it comes faster than you think. And if we don't do anything about our retirement accounts until we hit required distribution age, we could find ourselves getting hit much harder than we thought as we progress from our 70s into our 80s and into our 90s. And so the required distribution is the IRS's plan for your pre-tax retirement accounts. That's their plan for you. Well, when has the IRS's plan for you been the best plan for you? Hopefully you agree that that's not the case. And so you can certainly start taking withdrawals from these IRAs and managing the potential and future tax implications of these requirements later in life now. You can start doing that now. And so we're not just saying ignoring them and not taking them. That certainly is a big mistake, and there's some harsh penalties for not taking your required distributions if you're at that age. But we would also include the ignoring the RMD investment mistake as not taking advantage of the opportunity to unwind those accounts intentionally, not the way the IRS has planned for you, but the way that's really best for you. And so, Dan, maybe talk us through that a little bit more.
Yeah. Just briefly, I think most people that we work with are aware of this. It used to be 70 and a half, and then it went to 72 briefly. Now it's 73 and moving to 75, like you mentioned. And so they know that they have to start taking that money out. But like you mentioned, if they're not looking at the fact that there are some things that they can do, whether it's Roth conversion, so we pay the taxes on it now when you know what your tax bracket is, and then let that money after it's been converted grow tax free. There's a lot of things that can help provide greater wealth for you in the future. And one of the challenges that Brian and I both have with our clients that have large amounts of required minimum distributions is that they've got tens of thousands of dollars that they've got to pull out of these IRAs, and they have to pay taxes on them. And so now's the time. I mean, if you're retired, or 60, 65 in that area, to start looking at those future RMDs, and are there ways that we can take care of that now that will reduce the liability of that, going forward. And that, the RMD takes into account all of your IRAs, 401ks, 403bs, all of your qualified plans. So it is very crucial that we do, take a look at that and visit with us concerning when to start taking that and how to start taking money out and use it for charitable contributions. There's a lot of things that we can do with that. And I'm going to turn the tables just a little bit because I don't want to run out of time. So Brian, unless there's final moments on the RMDs, I'm going to throw a bonus question back to you. And that is something that we deal with almost daily. There's the fear mongers, there's those people that are overexcited about the markets going to, record levels. I'm talking about emotional investing. What's this? On one side, you've got fear, you've got other side, you've got greed, you've got hype, you've got panic. What do we need to do? What's the biggest challenge that you face with your clients regarding emotional investing?
Yeah, great question. And I think this is probably one of the bigger ones because we're in this vacuum of retirement where we're not adding to our investments. We're not living off of our income. We're living off of what we see as a depleting asset, right? It's going down over time. It's a limited resource that if we live too long and the markets aren't good enough, we could literally run out. And so the fear associated with this really makes the emotions so much more raw. And so really it's about going back to the basics. And so I want to share another picture here real quick that to me really helps quantify the challenge here, but also the opportunity. So I'm going to let everybody look at this for a second. So Dan, you had mentioned greed and fear. So
Yeah.
the difference with this, and hopefully you've got to the point where you've laughed a little bit about this, but if we truly track the behavior of retirees and really the broader investor, right? We can track the inflows and outflows of major mutual funds or major ETFs or even stocks. When do people buy? When do people sell? This is what happens, right? All the inflows come in when we're at the top. All the outflows go out when we're afraid and we're at the bottom. Repeat this process until broke, right? And so, from our perspective, it really is a function of not going with the herd, sticking to your long-term investment strategy, and remembering the simple basics of investing, which is to sell for higher than you bought for. If you can buy low, if you can go against the herd and buy low and sell higher, then guess what? You just made money in the market, right? It's a lot easier to process these ideas when we're dealing with real estate because we would never consider selling our house if it was for a loss, right? Say we're a real estate investor. Or if we're in the cattle industry, we're not going to round up a bunch of cattle and take them to auction when we're going to lose money on those cows. We're going to let them graze, right? Until it makes sense for you to sell. So no difference in retirement. And so again, that longer term investment strategy is what can help us curb our emotional reaction or our emotional desire to bail when things get rough. This is kind of the opposite of number two that we talked about, which was taking too much risk. Is natural for us to kind of slow that risk down. Well, this is where it's not natural. It's not natural for us to watch our investments go down in value, especially as a retiree. But we got to remember those simple investing 101 basics and make sure that our financial plan and maybe our bucket strategy will allow for different buckets that we can pull from for our needs when markets get tough so that we can weather the storm and ride this out. But no, we couldn't go without that little encore bonus question and calling out emotional investing as one of the investment mistakes that we see. But as I see it, number one, two, and three, and even number four, a lot of these ones that we've highlighted, if you do them well, have a good investment plan, don't take too much risk, but certainly take enough, have a consistent withdrawal strategy that's baked into your larger financial plan. If we have all those things, it is much easier to not panic and to not emotionally invest, either on the greed side or on the fear side. So let me bring this down here and we'll wrap up. Generally
Yeah.
speaking, as I see it, success long term in investing is really more about avoiding the pitfalls, avoiding the landmines, than it is about picking that stock or picking that asset class that's just going to go to the moon. And so obviously it's very fun to go and buy assets that are going nuts right now or that are kind of the fad of the day. And maybe we do that with a small amount of somebody's money. But generally speaking, if we can hit singles and doubles all day long, we're going to win that baseball game. And so if we're swinging for the fence every single at bat, we may find that we're striking out and possibly losing that game. And so, as always, we appreciate all of you so much, and we appreciate the trust that you have really extended to us as we put together your financial plans, your investment plans, your strategies for taxes and withdrawal strategies and required distributions, charitable giving, all the opportunities and options that we have to really be wise stewards over this wonderful bucket of wealth that you've had the opportunity to accumulate. And that stewardship is really what it comes down to is, we have these assets that you've accumulated and just doing right by them, doing the very best we can to be efficient and to use them efficiently and effectively and to avoid those pitfalls. So any final
Let me
thoughts from
just,
you, Dan?
yeah, absolutely. I would just echo and 100% agree with Brian's thoughts there regarding our sensitivity to helping you take care of your objectives and financial goals. And as we look forward to next month, just wanted to kind of put in a plug for what we're talking about next month is basically navigating the volatility of the market. And we got one of the industry specialists from State Street that'll be involved with us. That'll be on August 15th. I believe that's a Friday. So please look forward to that. And as always, we do appreciate the trust that you put in us. And I appreciate the team that we have here at Elevant is growing. If you haven't come in, you need to come in and see the team that we have in place here locally. And we have members outside of Twin Falls, outside of Idaho, still within the United States, but we're growing. We got a lot of people involved. Thank you all very much.